A table simply would not fit into the trunk of a car. To solve the problem, IKEA employee Gillis Lundgren took off the table legs. But what happened in that moment was about far more than just making a piece of furniture smaller. It was the beginning of rethinking an entire industry, from production and storage to shipping, retail, and even the role of the customer. But was IKEA really born from a single table? Why did a supplier boycott by Swedish competitors actually strengthen the company instead of stopping it? How did factories in Poland make their low-price model possible? By the end of this story, you will see that the success of IKEA came not from selling cheap furniture, but from completely redesigning the entire cost chain. Ingvar Kamprad's relationship with commerce started long before IKEA. Growing up in the Småland region in southern Sweden, he sold matches, fish, seeds, Christmas cards, pens, and various small goods. He used his bicycle to make deliveries to local customers, and kept customer records with his typewriter. However, contrary to the popular narrative, he did not start IKEA directly as a 17-year-old boy selling matches. The match selling belonged to his childhood. When IKEA was founded, the products Kamprad sold included goods that could be sent by mail, such as pens, watches, wallets, and nylon stockings. Because Kamprad was only 17 years old, he needed a guardian's permission to establish a company. His father let him use a cash reward he had earned for his good grades to cover the registration fee. IKEA was officially registered on July 28, 1943. The name itself was made up of the initials of 4 words in Kamprad's life: Ingvar Kamprad, the Älmhult farm where his family lived, and the Agunnaryd area where he grew up. In the beginning, there was no store, no furniture collection, and no famous blue and yellow brand. It was just a small mail-order company. But there was a major problem Kamprad had noticed even as a child. There was a huge difference between the cost of a pen at the factory and its selling price in the store. In his view, while production processes were becoming more efficient, getting the product from the factory to the customer was still slow, complicated, and expensive. Middlemen, warehouses, and traditional sales methods were driving up the final price. This observation formed the foundation of the entire system IKEA would develop years later. Kamprad was not just looking for cheaper products, he was trying to shorten the expensive path the product took to reach the end consumer. In the early years, he was particularly successful in the pen trade. By buying products directly from the manufacturer, he reduced the number of middlemen and offered lower prices to customers. However, this business was not always smooth sailing. In one deal, an unexpected increase in the purchase price caused him to sell hundreds of pens at a major loss. Import quotas and permits also made growth difficult. Kamprad tried having his own pens manufactured, but the results fell short. These failures pushed him to look for another product category. In the late 1940s, he turned his attention to furniture. The Småland region was well known for its deep forests, skilled carpenters, and small furniture workshops. One of Kamprad's competitors had started selling furniture by mail and proved there was a real demand. So IKEA added furniture to its product range in 1948. The furniture was shipped directly from local manufacturers to customers, completely cutting out the cost of middlemen. The very first advantage of IKEA was not extraordinary design, but the brilliant simplification it brought to distribution.
However, selling furniture was much harder than selling pens. A pen was small, light, and easy to transport. A table, chair, or cabinet took up a massive amount of space, could easily be damaged during transport, and created massive storage costs. Moreover, mail-order customers could not see the product before buying it. As competitors fought solely on low prices, doubts about product quality began to rise. To solve this problem, Kamprad set up a permanent exhibition space where customers could touch the furniture, sit on it, and judge the quality with their own eyes. The first furniture showroom in Älmhult opened on March 30, 1953. People started traveling from distant towns just to try out the products. As demand soared, a larger building was constructed, and the very first true IKEA store opened on October 28, 1958. Here, catalog sales, room arrangements resembling real homes, and products that could be taken away the same day were beautifully combined into a single, unified system. The most famous transformation of IKEA also took place during these defining years. According to company legend, when designer and employee Gillis Lundgren wanted to take a table to a catalog shoot, the product would not fit in his car. Frustrated, he took off the legs of the table. He quickly realized that a large piece of furniture could be transported much more easily when broken down into a few smaller pieces. The customer could easily put the parts back together at home. Thus, a simple transportation problem began to turn into a revolutionary new sales method. But it is not entirely accurate to tell this story as if a single person suddenly invented flat-pack furniture out of thin air. Furniture that could be disassembled and transported existed long before IKEA. The IKEA Museum notes that the flat-pack approach has examples dating back to the 19th century, and that a very similar furniture series was sold in Sweden in 1944. Furthermore, the 1953 IKEA catalog already featured tables that the customer could assemble at home. Therefore, Lundgren's table that would not fit in the car should be seen not as the moment the flat pack was magically discovered, but as a defining symbol of IKEA transforming an existing idea into a systematic global business model. The real innovation was not simply taking the pieces apart. The true innovation was redesigning the entire company around this very logic. When furniture went into a flat box, it took up significantly less space on a truck. You could hold far more products in the same warehouse. Transport was easier to plan, and the risk of damage plummeted. The customer could take the product home in their own car and do the assembly themselves. In doing so, a large portion of the work done by the manufacturer, the carrier, and the store was handed over to the customer. The customer was no longer just the person paying the bill. They were becoming the final critical link in the supply chain. They picked up the product from the store warehouse, carried it home themselves, and built it with their own hands. In return, they got a significantly lower price. IKEA was no longer selling ready-made furniture. They were selling a process that needed to be completed. This massive shift directly influenced furniture design itself. A product no longer had to just be beautiful, comfortable, or durable. It also had to be easily taken apart, fit into a tight, flat box, be mass-produced efficiently, and be assembled without professional help. The dimensions of the box were no longer an afterthought at the end of the design process. It became one of the core elements dictating how the product would look and how it would be manufactured. To lower the price of a piece of furniture, just finding cheaper wood was not enough anymore. You had to simultaneously consider the space the product took up, the assembly time, the fittings used, the packaging format, warehouse logistics, and exactly how the customer would physically carry it home. The true advantage of IKEA was born not from cutting a single cost, but from driving down dozens of interconnected costs all at once. But these incredibly low prices had begun to deeply disturb the traditional Swedish furniture industry. IKEA was selling through catalogs, buying products directly from factories, and presenting them to customers in a permanent showroom. Traditional stores, on the other hand, worked entirely through middlemen and entrenched distribution channels. The IKEA system was not just creating steep price competition, it was actively threatening the established order of the entire sector. Starting in 1952, the Swedish Association of Furniture Retailers began putting heavy pressure on the suppliers who sold products to IKEA. The message was crystal clear. Manufacturers who sold to IKEA risked losing their massive orders from traditional stores. A concerted effort was made to block IKEA from appearing at trade fairs. Rules were altered, and the company was kept out of various major exhibitions. Yet, some suppliers continued to secretly sell products to IKEA by using different company names or shipping to neutral addresses.
Kamprad also tried creative workarounds, like making purchases through a completely different company name. The ultimate goal of the boycott was to leave IKEA unable to find products, thereby crushing its low-price policy. In the short term, it truly created a severe crisis. The company's demand was growing rapidly, yet a significant portion of manufacturers in Sweden did not dare work with them. But the intense pressure from rivals led to two completely unexpected outcomes. The first outcome was that IKEA started designing its own furniture. Because the company could not source the models sold in rival stores, they were forced to develop entirely different products. Thus, the design activity that initially emerged purely out of necessity eventually formed the highly recognizable look of the brand. The boycott made it incredibly difficult for IKEA to sell the exact same products as its competitors at a lower price, but it rapidly accelerated the creation of its own unique identity. The second outcome was even more monumental. IKEA began looking outside of Sweden for its supply. The company first worked with Danish designers and manufacturers. Then it boldly turned its attention to Poland. In January 1961, Ingvar Kamprad traveled to Warsaw alongside his father, his purchasing manager Ragnar Sturde, and designer Bengt Ruda. The primary goal was to find new factories that could actually meet the ever-growing orders of IKEA. It was estimated that IKEA needed roughly 40,000 dining chairs that year, but nearly half of that amount was missing. The capacity of Swedish factories was simply not enough, and a major part of the industry was still actively boycotting the company. State-owned factories in Poland, however, had massive production capacity, abundant raw materials, and a strong desire to trade with Western companies. The initial contacts were not easy. The IKEA team was initially denied entry into certain factories. Eventually, the right connections were established, and a large chair factory in Radomsko was visited. The profound advantage of Poland was not just low labor costs. IKEA was offering manufacturers long-term contracts and massively high order volumes. This allowed the factories to secure their investments and plan their production with total confidence.
IKEA employees became deeply involved in the production processes, working side by side with suppliers on methods and new technologies that could further reduce costs. According to the company's own history, production costs in Poland could in some cases be nearly 50% lower than equivalent costs back in Sweden. This relationship was far from a one-sided cheap production deal. IKEA provided the factories with consistent orders, long-term stability, and deep technical knowledge, while Polish manufacturers offered the company immense capacity and a massive cost advantage. The Ogla chair, ordered in 1961, became one of the greatest symbols of this partnership and remained in the IKEA product range for many decades. Over time, Poland transformed into one of the most vital links in the company's entire supply system. If this incredible transformation we have seen so far shows how a company can turn a barrier set by its rivals into a massive advantage, you can like the video, because what truly strengthened IKEA was not the sudden removal of constraints, but how the company redesigned another part of its business model to counter every single limitation it faced. If the embargo by Swedish competitors had actually succeeded, IKEA would have found no products and would never have grown. But the intense pressure forced the company to develop its own design capabilities and build a formidable international supply network. While the traditional furniture industry wanted to push IKEA out of the system entirely, they unknowingly freed the company from its dependence on local manufacturers. When the flat-pack system merged perfectly with the production model in Poland, an unstoppable cost chain was formed. Furniture could now be produced at a very low cost and in massive volumes, packed in flat pieces, transported far more efficiently, and stored easily in vast stores. Customers carried the products themselves and assembled them at home. Every single tiny saving at each stage of the chain could be brilliantly reflected in the final retail price. The low price attracted even more customers, and the higher sales volume allowed IKEA to place massive orders with manufacturers. Those huge orders drove the cost down even further, heavily reinforcing the company's price advantage.
In this way, the IKEA system transformed into a powerful self-feeding loop. Lower costs meant more sales meant a higher production volume, and a higher volume ultimately meant lower costs all over again. The physical structure of the first IKEA store was the exact physical manifestation of this genius business model. Customers saw the furniture in beautiful arrangements that felt just like a home environment. They could test the products, and they could take some of them home the very same day in convenient flat packs. Later, in the company's massive superstores, the showroom, product information, vast warehouse, and customer flow were all seamlessly integrated into a single masterful layout. The store was no longer just an area to display products. It was a massive distribution machine engineered specifically to keep costs rock bottom. It should also not be forgotten that this model demands a price from the customer as well. In exchange for the low price, the customer spends much more time in the store, locates the product on the shelf or in the warehouse, carries it, and assembles it. Incorrectly installed parts, lost screws, and assembly processes that can take hours are famously known aspects of the IKEA experience. The company did not simply eliminate a portion of the cost, it brilliantly converted it into the labor of the customer. But millions of people gladly accepted this radical trade-off.
Because the price difference they gained in exchange for the work they did was highly significant. Furthermore, instead of waiting weeks for furniture to be delivered to their home, the customer could take the product home the exact same day. A small but very real sense of ownership and true accomplishment emerged over the item they built with their own hands. IKEA managed to turn a mandatory chore into a deeply integrated part of the buying experience. That is why what IKEA actually sells is never just a table, a chair, or a bookcase. The company sells a fully integrated system composed of product design, packaging, logistics, store layout, customer labor, and incredible supplier relationships. A competitor cannot easily copy this vast system simply by manufacturing a cheaper chair, because the true advantage does not lie in the price of a single chair, it lies entirely in the entire journey that chair takes from the initial idea phase all the way to the customer's living room. Ingvar Kamprad was the central figure of the story, but it is not entirely accurate to attribute the phenomenal success of IKEA solely to his individual genius. Designers like Gillis, Lundgren, visionary purchasing managers, manufacturers who bravely worked with the company despite the boycott in Sweden, massive factories in Poland, dedicated store employees, and the millions of customers who assembled the furniture in their homes all played a crucial role in shaping the system. Flat-pack furniture already existed. Kamprad's true monumental success was his ability to take existing ideas and forge them into a mutually supportive commercial model. When the legs of the table that did not fit in the car were removed, the only problem solved initially was simple transport. But as the thought behind this single action grew, completely different questions emerged. Who should assemble the furniture? How much stock should the store hold? How should the product be fundamentally designed? Where should the factory be located? What tasks should the customer be willing to take on for a low price? IKEA gave profoundly different answers to all these questions than the ones provided by the traditional industry. While competitors delivered the product fully ready, IKEA put it in a box. While competitors offered assembly as a premium service, IKEA left it completely to the customer. While competitors worked strictly with established local suppliers, IKEA boldly stepped outside the borders. While competitors tried to stop the company with a harsh boycott, IKEA developed its own unique design and an unstoppable global supply network. The most valuable lesson of this story is not that every single obstacle will automatically turn into an opportunity. Constraints can easily destroy companies. Opportunity only arises for those who can deeply rethink the system hidden behind the problem. IKEA did not just settle for making the table fit into the car. They questioned why furniture was not designed to be easily transportable from the very beginning.
They did not just sit and wait for Swedish suppliers to come back. They aggressively researched how production could be established in completely different countries. Sometimes, the rules of an industry seem completely unchangeable simply because absolutely no one has dared to question them. For many long years, it was considered completely natural for furniture to be assembled at the factory, transported in massive volumes, and delivered fully ready to the customer. IKEA directed the exact same question to every single stage of this process. Is there another way to do this much simpler and at a significantly lower cost? The table that simply would not fit into the trunk of a car became the most powerful symbol of this very question.
However, what ultimately transformed IKEA into a massive global powerhouse was not a single creative spark. It was the relentless alignment of distribution, design, production, supply, and customer behavior around the exact same low-price goal for decades. What do you think is the true power that changes massive companies? Is it coming up with a completely new idea from scratch, or deeply questioning the costs and habits that everyone else blindly accepts as normal? To discover the crucial decisions, severe crises, and unseen business models behind the rise of massive companies, you can subscribe to Traces to the Summit. Because sometimes the entire future of an industry is fundamentally changed not by an unsolvable massive problem, but by an ordinary table that simply wouldn't fit into a car.